Shane Gillis, live on stage.
I'm a bit of a history buff, which, by the way, that is early onset Republican.
His biggest tour ever is coming to Des Moines.
If you're a white dude in your 20s and 30s and you're like, I can't stop reading about World War II, it's coming, bro. Right?
See Shane Gillis with his unmistakable comedic style. Live at Wells Fargo Arena Saturday, May 31st. Get tickets now at iowaeventcenter.com. For more, visit ShaneMGillis.com.
Jason Aldean, Full Throttle Tour 2025, powered by Patriot Mobile. When the lights come on. Friday, September 19th, Wells Fargo Arena. With Nate Smith. And Ray Lynn. Jason Aldean. On sale now at iowaeventcenter.com. Jason Aldean live.
Hello and welcome into Bigger Than 12 on a Sunday here on the Iowa Everywhere Network. Is there something big going on today? I can't quite put my finger on it.
I don't think so.
Oh! Pitchers and catchers report. Shota Imanaga out there in Arizona for the Chicago Cubs. Big day. Also in maybe this is what I was thinking of. Also in Arizona. Final Sunday of the Waste Management Open.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Huh.
Huge day. Huge day. But the biggest event of the day, of course, is Bigger Than 12 here on Iowa Everywhere. I'm Jake Brend, joined by Derek Duke in Texas. How are you doing, my friend?
Doing great as always. A little tired, but man, I want to know where the hell. Texted you after yesterday. I said, where the hell did a winter go? It was 90 degrees down here yesterday. Ridiculous.
We're in kind of the sweet spot right now where we had it warm for a little bit. We had 40s and 50s for a week. Now we're back down to the 20s, but 20s is manageable. So I'm sorry you got to deal with 90s. That sounds horrible right now.
Yeah, it's summer, and it's funny. We passed by the lake. My in-laws took some pictures of the lake, and I think there's more water in my bathtub than there is in the lake right now. It's kind of depressing.
That is depressing.
It's really depressing. Boats can't even go in there. But what's really depressing is I have to look at that stupid shirt you're wearing for the next hour on this show.
Hey, it's my Super Bowl.
Oh, jeez.
The Eagles have the chance to lose today. It's my Super Bowl. I'm a pathetic fan.
You're rooting for the Chiefs because you hate the Eagles, and I'm rooting for the Eagles because I hate the Chiefs. So it's a pretty interesting scenario.
No, I'm cheering for the Chiefs because I respect the Chiefs. I like the Chiefs. They're great story, good underdog story. A lot of people counted them out. Here they are, proving people wrong. No, I would say I dislike the Chiefs, but I don't hate the Chiefs necessarily.
So you're not a Swiftie?
No, I'm not a Swiftie, but I'm not an anti-Swiftie either. So I
got you.
But I do hate the Eagles with all my heart. I don't know if there's a professional sports organization that comes close to hatred as it is the Eagles. It's probably the Lakers and St. Louis Cardinals next, but the gap between those is unsurmountable. I absolutely despise the Philadelphia Eagles. I cannot wait for them to lose.
The sad thing is there's probably listeners out there that are actually an Eagles fan or a Chiefs fan watching today, and they're listening to the show. And we're just crapping all over their teams.
Well, if you're here, just know that you guys have it better than us. Cowboys and Texans fans.
For damn sure.
Man, it's rough out here for us. Thanks for joining us on a Super Bowl Sunday. Whenever you're listening, however you're watching or listening, thanks for being here. We got a good show for you today on hand on Bigger Than 12. We're going to focus on three big games from Saturday, and we'll dive into some Houston talk as well. But K-State beats Kansas. Arizona wins a great game over Texas Tech, and Iowa State bounces back. We'll also talk some way too early 2025 Big 12 football and finish up with some picks heading into the early week slate. As always, Bigger Than 12 is presented by WealthCharter Retirement Planning and Tax. Tax season is coming up. There's been a lot of changes with with account limits. It's complicated. I'm not going to try and explain it. Someone that will be good at explaining it is Tim Hawkins and his team over at WealthCharter. They're celebrating 25 years of simplifying wealth. We thank WealthCharter for sponsoring this program. If you want to help support us, go support WealthCharter. You can do that at WealthCharterRetirement.com and schedule an appointment at their Ankeny office. Let's start with the biggest rivalry game from the weekend. K-State beats Kansas 81-73, 5 wins in a row for the Wildcats. Did this game say more about K-State or KU?
I think for me, it probably goes back to Kansas State here because, I mean, you could make an argument for both because I think both teams are very interesting, and either one, to me, is a major headline here in the Big 12, but I think I have to go Kansas State. I said last week on the show that earlier in the year that we both buried Kansas State 6 feet in the ground, held a service, and called it a season. And what Jerome Tang and his team have literally done, have crawled out of that grave and won 5 games in a row now. And what's really impressive during this win streak is that 3 of those 5 wins have come against ranked teams. And while some people may look at the Kansas box score and go, oh, Kansas probably had an off night, they really didn't. I mean, Kansas State earned that win. Kansas shot 50% from the field in that game, and their 2 guys, Dickinson and Mayo, played pretty well, and Kansas State still found a way to beat them. David Gibson drops, 20, shoots lights out, and Doug McDaniel, I mean, he's been playing extremely well during this win streak, and he gets them 15 points and I believe 11 assists, and even chipped in with 6 rebounds. But again, this team was 1-6 in Big 12 play at one point. Nobody gave them a chance, and here we are going to mid-February, and they are arguably the hottest team in the Big 12 right now. We can laugh at Jerome Tang and his antics, which trust me, there's been plenty of them this season during the offseason, but that man is pushing the right buttons for this team, and I wouldn't want to play them right now. And I'm just curious to see how long this can keep going for them. Maybe they're rolling a march like this, but if they do, watch out.
Yeah, you could make the case that they're the hottest team in America, let alone the Big 12. Their confidence is through the roof. I saw that firsthand in Ames just a week ago. In their last 4 games, they've made 10-plus threes in all of them. And a lot of them are tough shots, heat checks, if you will. It doesn't look like a 12-11 team. And that's a credit to Jerome Tang. He has turned them around into, I mean, right now, a top 5 or 6 team in the conference. In a way, they're similar to the season that KU football had this year, to where it was such a disaster the first half of the season. But you knew the talent was there, and eventually they've been able to turn it around. And again, Tang is the one that deserves credit for that, because any coach can get talent for the most part, but not every coach can maximize that talent. And I'm not going to say that Tang has maximized that talent, because they're 12-11. But what he has done is when that talent has hit adversity, he has gotten them up off the ground, and they're fighting, and that's impressive.
For sure.
Kansas, on the other hand, we'll talk about them for a little bit. I think this is just who they are. Dating back to last year, 8 losses on the road to unranked teams. That is not Kansas basketball. That is not a Bill Self program. That's unacceptable. And Bill Self himself said it in his post-game press conference. If you haven't watched or listened, I would highly recommend a Bill Self press conference after a win or a loss. For a media nut like me, it's like candy. It's so good. But he said they didn't look 12-11, and we didn't look like a top 20 team. And at this point, KU is just not a top 20 team when they're on the road. At Fog Allen, they can beat anybody. When they're playing at their best, they can beat anybody. But with how they've looked on the road this season and last season, they are ripe for an upset in March. Just really ripe for an upset in March.
Yeah, for me, this was just another showing of inconsistency from this team. It's been a roller coaster season for Bill Self that's been kind of full of emotions. I thought maybe they turned the corner a bit against Iowa State, but then You go out on Saturday, you lose to your in-state rival. And what's funny about the losses, their offense, I thought, played pretty well, which has kind of been the weak point for them. But meanwhile, their defense just kind of had a complete letdown. Kansas State really did shoot lights out in that game, and they ended up giving 81. But again, this is just another example of inconsistency from this team. Like, I don't know how anybody has any confidence in this team moving forward. Like, you never know what Kansas team is going to show up on any given night.
Yeah, so here's this quote from Bill Self after the game. This one's a little bigger than the last one. He said, I would say, honestly, maybe having a mindset that it's not a game day attitude. It's an everyday attitude because our practice is inconsistent as well when it comes to that also. And he's talking about inconsistency. He adds, we're not talented enough that we can just show up and win off of talent. So we've got to be turned up and have to play a certain way. When we do that, we can play with anybody and beat anybody. But when we don't, it drops quite a bit. And then Friday at practice, the same message was sent, and we played today on that end exactly like we practiced yesterday. That is a team that lacks leadership. That's a team that lacks toughness. That's a team that was not constructed as a team. They were brought in a lot of talent, a lot of guys that can get theirs, but they are clearly not playing together as a team. And at some point, if you've listened to Bill Self talk this year, he has called his team out a lot. I saw it firsthand in Ames. At some point, there's only so many times that you can call out your team before it's just on them to turn it around. And at this point, with what I've seen in this sample size, I don't think they're going to turn the corner to consistently be a mentally tough team.
I mean, we're a month away essentially from the Big 12 tournament in Kansas City, and we're still talking about this team still trying to put together the pieces to this puzzle that I keep talking about, and it still has yet to happen on a consistent basis. And at this point, you're right. If it hasn't happened yet, I'm not sure if it's going to happen all season long.
And you look at my boy Christian Brown, won a national championship at KU 3 years ago. 3 years ago. Like, he played with a couple guys on this team. He played with DeJuan Harris, KJ Adams. He's on Twitter complaining about how guys on this team don't represent Kansas and are playing for themselves. And it's one thing when you have a former player that, he's in his 40s or 50s saying that. Now, this is a player that was there 3 years ago. He was in those walls with some of those guys. That, to me, is a striking problem. Back to K-State. We got to have a real conversation now on if they're a legitimate threat to make the tournament. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's funny because when I looked at Joe Lunardi's bracketology last week on Friday, I believe it was, ESPN didn't even have the Wildcats like on the bubble. Like, Kansas State was nowhere to be found. And with the win over Kansas, Kansas State's now above 500 overall. They're 500 in conference play. And when I look at their remaining schedule, I actually think it's pretty favorable. Now, they do have two huge games coming up this week when they host Arizona, and then they go to Provo on Saturday. But if you can split those games, put you at 7-7, still at 500. But here's the stretch I like for them to rack up some wins. They have a 5-game stretch where they play Utah, Arizona State, UCF, Colorado, and Cincinnati. I think this team is capable of winning all 5 of those, or at the very least, they should win 4 of those games. And so I could see this Kansas State team winning 12 games in conference play. And when you look at their wins, that should be good enough to earn them a spot in the tournament. And plus, if they play well in Kansas City, that's going to only make their case even further for the committee. So I really like this stretch coming up for them. Obviously, it's going to be tough this coming week, but after that, I think it's very favorable.
They certainly have the talent. They've shown that, and they're playing like a tournament team, but they've dug themselves such a deep hole. They have no room for error, like none. So you look at that schedule. You have the 2 huge games that could be marquee wins on their resume, Arizona and Iowa State. I would think you need to split those. Get one of them, and then probably have to win all the others. If because it's not just, they had a rough non-conference. They had as bad of a non-conference as you could have asked. And they lost 6 games to start Big 12 play. Or no, not to start Big 12 play, but
1-6, yeah.
Yeah, 1-6 to start Big 12 play. So I know 12 conference wins would be important, but at the same time, 17-15 is a tough sell. So I think you gotta, one loss the rest of the way probably gets you in. 2 losses, you're probably very, very fringe. Anything more than that, you're probably toast. The good news for them, the bubble is so weak this year. This is one of the weakest bubbles in a long time. So if they can rack up those wins, they can make it interesting. And then, I mean, if they're an 11 seed in the NCAA tournament, you don't want to play them.
No.
With how they've been playing the last month, you do not want to see those guys whatsoever.
No, and like I said, I think if they make a push in Kansas City, I think that can certainly help their case as well. If they can win 3, maybe 2 or 3 games there. But again, you're right. They dug themselves a really big hole, but it's very interesting to see them kind of trying to crawl out of it because, again, like you said, that would be a team in the tournament as an 11 seed or whatever you do not want to see in your bracket.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up the Big 12 tournament. I kind of forgot about that. It's weird being in the position where Iowa State's in, to where we saw last year that winning the tournament did nothing for them, essentially. They beat the number 1 team in the country by 30, and it didn't affect their seeding. But what these conference tournaments, what they do mean to people are those bubble teams.
Yep.
And the conference tournaments make or break a tournament case at the end of the season. It just doesn't really change the top seeds necessarily.
And who knows? Maybe Kansas State wins the Big 12 tournament. I don't know. Maybe they just punch it without having to worry about it at all.
Leave no doubt. Yeah.
Exactly.
No. Well, let's move over to Tucson. Arizona beats Texas Tech in an old school Big 12 matchup. I know Arizona is not an old school Big 12 team, but the way this game felt, tough, great atmosphere, chippy. You could tell that this was the second time that these teams had seen each other all year. Arizona gets the best of them at home. What did you see from this game, Derek?
I think you're right. Just a tough physical battle. I think the one thing that stood out to me for Tech, obviously, Toppin scored a bunch of points. Darian Williams. They had some help from Christian Anderson from the bench as well. But for me, Tech got out rebounded, and I thought defensively they didn't play as well as they have been over the last few weeks. I thought they've been pretty good on the defensive side of the ball, but I just didn't see it really on Saturday night. And from Arizona, I mean, this is just another great win for this team. Caleb Love had another big night. I think a bunch of their starters did as well. Bradley had a big night. And then you get KJ Lewis and Visser dropping 15 both from the bench, which I thought was really huge for this team. And when you look at the bench points, it really wasn't even close in Arizona's favor. But for me, I think Arizona, with the way they're playing on both sides defensively and their offense is clicking at the right time. Another team I think that we're going to say, like, I wouldn't want to play Arizona right now because they're cooking up something really good there in Tucson. Texas Tech, on the other hand, is kind of just, I want to push them in that elite level, and I keep saying they're a team I think that could make a really big run in the NCAA tournament. I still think they can. I just need to see more from it. Maybe this just was a letdown. Every team's had a letdown on the road at this point. Pretty much everybody, maybe outside of Houston, but I think both of these teams are going to be fine at the end of this. It's just unfortunate for Tech to lose this one, but a big win for Arizona.
See, I do not think that this was a letdown for Tech at all. That is a hornet's nest of an atmosphere, and it felt like every 5 minutes they were in danger of getting blown out and never did. They anytime Arizona got it to 8, Darian Williams came down, hit a big shot. Elijah Hawkins had one of his 12 assists. I was super impressed with Texas Tech. I left this game honestly feeling stronger about both teams than I did coming in. I think both of these teams are Elite Eight, Final Four. Not bound, but certainly potential. I would put them in that top tier of the Big 12 at this point. I feel that strongly about both teams. And it's funny because I thought this matchup was almost the inverse of the one that we saw in Lubbock a few weeks ago. Very hard-fought games. Really could have been anybody's in the last 5 minutes, but the road team went cold down the stretch. But you said it. The difference in this game was what Arizona did down low. Maybe the best game of the season from Henry Visar. I love the big lineup with him and Tobey Akawa. I mean, Arizona had 48 48 points in the paint to Tech's 28. Yep. That was the complete difference. And while it wasn't a great day for Caleb Love offensively, what he and Jaden Bradley did to help make life tough on Chance McMillan, who scored just 8 points, and Darian Williams, who, he got his 17, but it was an inefficient 17. All of Tech struggled around the rim, and that was because of those big guys, and then the guards, of course, making life difficult up top. It was a huge win for Arizona.
Yeah, and I don't mean to say like let down, like I don't think they're going to do anything after the season in the tournament, but I think just this particular night, and like I said, everybody has just kind of one of those nights where things just may not be clicking, and that's going to happen in this conference, especially on the road. But you're right. I think probably both of these teams can certainly make a push. I don't know if I'm going to say Final Four, Sweet 16, Elite 8. I can definitely buy into that. And I'll say this about Arizona. They've really impressed me lately with the way they've been playing. And maybe I had my doubts about them before the season, but I think that's been cleared now. I just think they're really a really good team right now.
I have a lot of Texas Tech stock. I honestly feel as good as picking them to the Final Four as any other team in the conference. Like, I feel that strongly about them. They had all around a bad game from their 4 best players. I know Toppin and Williams got theirs, but man, they struggled.
Yep.
Hawkins had a good day at point, but again, inefficient, and McMillan couldn't get it going, and they were still within striking distance on the road. That to me says a great team, and that's a win, or that's a game on a neutral floor where they probably come away with a win. And what they've gotten from Christian Anderson off the bench has been remarkable. What we saw from him against Iowa State a month ago, which, got to remind yourself, that was their first loss since the last time Milan Momcilovic played. If you put that into perspective, that's how long it'd been since they lost.
Oh.
So they're playing great basketball. They're playing hot basketball. If I had to poke a hole, it's probably just overall front court depth. If Toppin had some help down low, or maybe a little more help off the bench from big guys, he might have been a little more effective. But again, I'm kind of nitpicking at this point. I want to talk big picture for both of these teams, because Tech isn't completely out of the Big 12 picture, but they can probably only afford one more loss, and they've got a pretty easy stretch coming up. Arizona State, at Okie State, at TCU, West Virginia at home before playing Houston at home. But Arizona is firmly in the race. And we'll talk about Houston in a minute, but they're not playing their best basketball right now. But I don't know if it's going to matter. Listen to this next 3 from Arizona. At K-State, which we know how tough a game that's going to be.
Yep.
Houston at home, and then at Baylor. And they still have at Iowa State and at KU later in the season. So Arizona's playing great. I will learn a lot about them down the stretch of the season. I don't really give them much of a shot in the Big 12 race. But man, they've shown a lot to me. But that's
about as tough as it gets, man. That's
hard.
Really tough. I don't care who you are in this conference. That's a damn tough schedule remaining. Oh.
Yeah,
Yeah.
What's the tougher game? This might sound crazy. Is it at K-State or at home against Houston?
I think with the way Kansas State's playing at this very moment, going to the Octagon of Doom, I don't see that ending well for Arizona. We'll find out here, and we're going to do a pick on that game later in the show. But I think that's the tougher game right now, going to Kansas State. Houston's a good team. Don't get me wrong, but you get them at home. But going to Kansas State, that's going to be a really tough environment.
Yeah, I can't disagree. I'm still going to go Houston. Team-wise, Houston knows how to win in those tough atmospheres. They've already won at Fog Allen, but the fact that we're even having that conversation,
it's crazy.
Says a lot about what K-State's done.
Could you imagine asking that question a month ago?
Yeah. What are we talking? Women's basketball?
Yeah.
But in women's basketball, that wouldn't be a question. K-State's a top 15 team.
Yes.
And Houston is
not good.
Yeah, for lack of a better word, not a top 15 team. Let's move to Ames. Iowa State beats TCU 82-52. And everything's fixed. I think it's that simple. Milan Momcilovic is back. The last month didn't happen. Tongue in cheek. Is Milan the fix to that many problems, or was Saturday just a mirage?
I don't know what it was. But last week I was saying it may take Milan a couple games to get adjusted, and he goes out on Saturday and looks like his old self right off the bat. I mean, he comes in, makes 4 out of his 7 threes, and everything just appeared to be back to normal. Like, this offense needed a jolt, and I thought Milan brought that on Saturday against TCU. And even when he doesn't have the ball, the spacing he brings to the floor is crucial for this offense. And you saw it. It helps everyone around him. Jefferson and Jackson down low were able to benefit from the spacing. It opens up opportunities for other guys to drive in the lane as well. And perhaps the man who benefited the most from it was Curtis Jones. I mean, he looked like the guy who we were talking about as the Big 12 Player of the Year a few weeks ago, and Jones was able to come off the bench and give you 24. So that was huge. And I think what Milan did was not just help the offense flow better with the spacing, but it also took some pressure off of Jones, which is why I think he struggled over the last few games, because he knew he had to be really good. He had to bring his A game if Iowa State wanted to win. And the offense I saw on Saturday looked much better than what I saw in the last few games, but it's not perfect by any means. Like, the turnovers have to get better, cleaned up. But other than that, it was a good, solid bounce back win for Iowa State. And I'll be the first to admit it. I think I picked TCU last week to cover that spread. And boy, I was just dead wrong, because Iowa State just blew them out of the water.
Yeah, and what's funny is Milan didn't even do anything in the first half.
Yep.
He was 0 of 2, but it still helped the offense that he was even out there, because the other team has to respect him that much.
Yep.
And that's what's important. And I'll admit, I've been wrong. I was on record after the Momcilovic injury when I said that I thought he was expendable, in the sense that, like, him playing well is the difference between the team winning by 10 and the team winning by 20. I don't really think I saw his impact as far as stretching the floor as much as we saw it when he wasn't on the floor. And now we've got, pretty much a 50-game sample size in his year and a half at Iowa State. And you look at what the Iowa State offense was like the 2 years before he was there, he is a lot more valuable than I think I ever thought. And I know that's a lot of pressure to put on the guy, but at the same time, it's not that much pressure, because it's not saying, oh man, Milan has to go out there and drop 20 for us to even have a shot. It's just, Milan's got to just be on the floor.
Yep.
And the fact that he will have those 20-point games coming, that is what the difference in a Sweet 16 and a Final Four team is, in my opinion. And that showed on Saturday. And yes, it was TCU. That is not a good team. I was not impressed with their defense really at all. I wasn't really impressed with TCU in any stretch of the mean, and I don't think Jamie Dixon was either, listening to him after the game. But you just look at the last 7 games in this game, it's pretty clear what the difference was. A bit of a hot topic around Cyclone Nation right now is the Nate Heisey, Demarion Watson conversation, and I'm more of a Heisey guy than most. I think I might be. I did back in November. I bought a condo on Heisey Island. So
how's that working out for you?
I haven't sold it.
Okay.
And what I want to say is, I know Heisey had a real rough offensive stretch the last month.
Yep. But
so did the whole team. And his rough stretch really happened in Milan's absence, like everybody else's did. I think the way that I'm going to judge the bench, I'm going to reserve judgment on these guys until the Houston game. Because Milan being back, yes, it helps Gilbert. Yes, it helps give the bigs room. It helps take the pressure off of Curtis Jones. But it also does help a guy like Nate Heisey, who, I mean, it would be nice if he could find his shooting stroke again, but he's also proven a lot of times this season to be a really good cutter. And I think we saw that a little bit yesterday. And while his offensive struggles did affect his defense a little bit, I still like Heisey on defense more than Watson. Heisey is more of the one-on-one, go in and stop a guy, where Watson is the hustle, grab an offensive rebound, crash the boards. He's the help defense guy, but Watson is by no stretch of the means some lockdown defender. And I think that's kind of been twisted a little bit. So I'm not anti-Watson, but I want to hear your thoughts.
I was actually going to go Watson here. I think his number is a little bit more favorable. And, like you said, over the last few games, Nate's been in a kind of just a no man's land as far as points go. But I think Watson, too, better rebounder. He may not be as good of a defender, as you would say. But I just think at this point, just any kind of help you can get crashing the boards, I think is big. And especially coming down the stretch here as we go head to the Big 12 title tournament. But I don't know. I think it probably is a toss-up at this point. I personally would almost say it's splitting hairs, really, but I'd probably lean Watson, but I could probably be swayed either way at this point. And you're right. Maybe it's not fair with Milan now coming back as we fair to judge them, with Milan out because you're right. Everybody struggled when Milan was out. So this team's going to look a whole lot different. But, maybe we'll see down the stretch here who plays better. Just both give them both minutes and see how it goes.
I'll throw a wrench in this argument. I wouldn't mind seeing Watson get some of Brant Chatfield's minutes. I think those two guys play a more similar role than Heisey and Watson. Like, I know they're... I don't know. The size looks more similar between those two. But I think what Heisey's asked to do on defense is not really comparable to what Watson is. I think Watson is a lot more similar to Chatfield, where he is doing the dirty work. He's grabbing the offensive rebounds. And Chatfield just hasn't been doing that lately. I don't know if it's the learning curve of the Big 12. It takes adjustments for big guys to sustain what they're doing over the course of the season, but Chatfield has not been doing that, and I don't really know how much of that has to do with Momcilovic's absence, because we saw that stretch where he was a force grabbing all of those offensive rebounds. His rebounding numbers are significantly down lately, and he hasn't added anything on offense. So maybe down the stretch, I would like to see Watson getting more of those minutes. The only problem with that is it's asking a lot more out of Joshua Jefferson, because he would probably have to eat up some more minutes at the 5 and play against bigger bodies, and I don't know what that would do for the team.
Yeah, we'll see how it goes down the stretch. The good thing is we're kind of splitting hairs here between an Iowa State win where they won by almost like 30 points. So
yeah,
not a bad argument to have here when you win that by that much.
Let's move on to Houston. A 2-0 week, but probably not a 2-0 week like like most others they've had. Not a pretty stretch. They beat Oklahoma State at home, and they beat Colorado on the road. Neither game dominant. I can't imagine Kelvin Sampson was happy. Was this a concerning week, or was it, just tough stretches like that happen?
I'm not ready to hit the panic button on this team just yet. I know some people will want to say, Houston, we have a problem because it's funny, but I'm not there yet. Since the start of December, this team still only lost one game, which is to Texas Tech in overtime. And yes, Houston's offense has struggled a bit over the last two games. And after that, after that game, LJ Cryer did appear to have maybe an injury there, but it looks like he's going to be okay. Juwan Roberts, monster game for the Cougars on Saturday, dropping 20, missed just 2 shots in that game. And I know they played a bad Colorado team who lost like 1 million games in a row in the Big 12, but Houston did pick up a Big 12 road win. And I always say that playing on the road in this conference isn't easy. And anytime you can pick up a road win, it doesn't matter necessarily what it looks like. And so I'm not going to hit the panic button. And look at this. Houston has some really big games coming up. They get Baylor on Big Monday, then go to Arizona on Saturday. So let's see how this week plays out. And if it doesn't play out right, maybe I'll hit that panic button. But right now, I'm not touching it.
Yeah, it never felt like they were going to lose either game.
Nope.
Colorado did get it down to 2 with 5 minutes left, though. But every time Houston needed a bucket, they got one from Juwan Roberts, and they were able to get stops. So, I don't want to be in that Houston locker room today. I would imagine it's a really tough practice from Kelvin Sampson because he cannot be happy with what he's seen from his team in the last 3 games. But at the same time, they haven't had Emmanuel Sharp. They're probably their second or third best player, and it was a road game. The Oklahoma State game was a letdown game.
Yep.
It happens. So my concern meter isn't very high. But this is a tough stretch coming up. And if they don't have Sharp for it, they could find themselves certainly in a tough game against Baylor. I know Baylor isn't the Baylor that we're used to, but they're still capable of going for 85 any given night. They are that talented and they are that streaky. At Arizona, we know how tough that is. Follow that up with the road game at Arizona State. If they play like they did against Colorado, they could lose to Arizona State, and then it's Iowa State and Tech. So if a couple breaks go against them, maybe Sharp doesn't come back as soon as we think, it could make the Big 12 race interesting. But again, my concern meter is probably a 0.5 out of 10.
I'd probably be the same. Unless they go 0-2 this week, maybe I'll start panicking. But right now, I'm not going to touch the panic button.
Yeah, if they lost to Baylor at home, I think I'd maybe start panicking a little bit, just because that'd be 2 losses in 3 games at home when they typically don't lose at home. But I guess we'll have to see. That'll be coming up in our picks in just a few minutes.
Just about to say that.
We'll jump into our Iowa trivia question in a second. First, I want to give a thanks to Freedom Tire. Man, I've been driving all over, it feels like. And I drove down to Lawrence last week. I was in Iowa City a couple days ago. I wouldn't be able to do it if I didn't have the help from the folks at Freedom Tire. I'm actually due for an oil change, so I'll head in there next week and on the Fleur location in Des Moines and stop and get some great customer service, drink a cup of coffee, and be out of there in no time at all. You can do the same. Visit any location in Altoona, Ames, Fleur Drive, Des Moines, and West Des Moines, along with Urbandale. They specialize in tires, but they do it all. Go stop at Freedom Tire and help support Iowa everywhere. We thank Freedom Tire. Aiden, come on in with the Iowa trivia question.
All right, Derek. Lock in. This Ames native went on to win a Heisman Trophy and was the number 1 overall pick in the NFL draft.
It's Joe Burrow, right?
Yes.
Okay, I knew that one.
Yeah.
I remember that one.
Almost a Cyclone.
I remember, it's funny, I remember him. Wasn't somebody asking about the Ames water? Was that the...
Yeah. Was that at the Super Bowl a couple years ago?
I think that was at the Super Bowl, like at the media day. I think somebody asked him about the Ames water. And at that point, before that, I actually had no idea he was from there. So that's what made me.
Yeah, his dad was a coach at Iowa State under Jim Walden. So he was born in Ames. I think he moved away when he was like 1 or 2. He was really young. But when he left Ohio State and he was in the portal, he was down to Iowa State, Nebraska, and LSU. And it's urban legend that there was a good chance he was going to go to Iowa State, but then Kyle Kempt got granted a 6th year out of eligibility out of nowhere. So Iowa State could have had Joe Burrow for 2 years, and who knows? Who knows if that happens? Does Brock Purdy ever get his chance? Like it's an interesting what if.
That's a whole lot of what ifs there. I think it worked out just fine for him at LSU.
Yeah, that's debatable. No, he had the greatest season in the history of college football.
One of the greatest teams maybe in college football history too, for that.
I think it's the greatest team ever. I do.
I'm going to give some respect to the 01 Hurricanes. It's maybe before your time, but
no, I know the Canes. Don't worry. Still, I'm taking Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase. Those teams were legit.
That's fair.
Speaking of football, we're going to talk a little football. Nothing too in depth. Not a bunch of X's and O's. Just a few questions to ponder as the season is only a short 6 months away. Who would you tab as the early favorite to win the Big 12 in 2025?
Oh, I hate these questions so much. But if you're looking at the Vegas odds that came out recently, it's Arizona State. Sam Leavitt was a guy we saw get better each and every week as a freshman. And they did lose Mr. Everything and your boy Cam Scatterby. That's definitely going to hurt the offense. Kansas State returns a bunch of guys, including Avery Johnson, who I expect to kind of have a bounce-back season in 25. And there's some other teams I would throw in there as well. Iowa State, Baylor, BYU, of course. But as of right now, I'd probably just lean Arizona State, and maybe that's just recent bias factor here. But you know, I really hate doing this because from right now until kickoff, like these teams are going to end up looking so much different with the transfer portal, and I don't really plan on making any picks until the summer. Although I guess it can't be any worse than last year when I picked Utah and Oklahoma State to make the Big 12 title game, and they ended up as two of the worst teams in the conference. So maybe it's not fair for me to give the teams the kiss of death just yet.
Yeah, we are not writing this in Sharpie. I promise. We're doing this just to keep the brain somewhat in football mode, doing these exercises. And I've been looking at the schedule like we discussed last week. Arizona State's got it tough.
They do.
And they're going to have a target on their back, and they're not going to have their boy Scatterby. I really like Sam Leavitt. But he might have been put into some conversations that are a little too high, I think, in my opinion. Not that he doesn't belong in the elite college football conversation, but I don't know if he consistently has shown that yet. He could make a huge jump, don't get me wrong. But with all those reasons, I do think I'm going to go with Kansas State.
That's fair.
The way the schedule breaks, but that leads me pretty easily into the next question, which is which team has the most pressure on them to succeed in 2025? And I do think it's Kansas State. Since they won the Big 12 in 2022, back-to-back disappointing seasons. They should have been there last year. They absolutely should have been way more in the mix than they were in November. Some of that was Avery Johnson. Some of that was the defense. I don't care what the problem was. It's got to get fixed for 2025 because if they aren't in the mix again, that would be 3 straight disappointing seasons for K-State. I do think there's a lot of other arguments for other teams, but because K-State's my way too early pick, I also think that the pressure comes with them.
Yeah, and let me say, I was picking between Arizona State and Kansas State when that first question came up about who our favorite was. As far as which team has the most pressure on them, I would probably put the teams who have the coaches on the hot seat first when it comes to pressure to win now. And maybe that's a different way of looking at this question. And I look at two teams. One is Oklahoma State. The Cowboys went winless in Big 12 play for the first time in over 30 years, and they look like a shell of that 2023 team the year before. And Mike Gundy essentially cleaned house on his staff. And I think some people forget that Gundy had some very interesting meetings with the school. Do you remember the whole deal where he walked out on the meeting and they said he was at a standoff with the school over his contract? And then now recently here, last week, their school president, Casey Schrum, resigned last week. And I don't know what's going on in Stillwater, but I do know that Mike Gundy is finally under some pressure to win now. 2 of his last 3 seasons there, he's finished below 500 in conference play, and we aren't used to seeing that from Oklahoma State. And this is a make or break year, I think, for Mike Gundy in this program. The other would be Cincinnati with Scott Satterfield. They needed just one win with like 5 games left on their schedule last year to get to a bowl game, and they lose out. And I was never a fan of the hire to begin with, and now they're heading into year 3 with him. If he doesn't get his shit together, like, I could see them parting ways with Scott Satterfield.
See, I don't even consider Cincinnati in that conversation relevance-wise, because I do think Satterfield's a dead man walking. If I would have gone a different direction from K-State, I was thinking probably TCU and Utah were 2 teams that I thought of. With what we saw from TCU down the stretch, that's a team that needs a good 2025, and I think they're going to be expected to be near the top with what they bring back in Josh Hoover. And at an oil school like TCU, there's only so many years that Sonny Dykes will be able to lean back on that national championship appearance. Fair or not, that's how it is. And Utah, those guys came in favorites, and they finished near the bottom of the Big 12. Whittingham seemingly made a lot of changes into how they're approaching NIL, but they're still going to need a quarterback.
Yep.
And that fan base, I don't know if they can handle another disappointing year. I don't. Part of me, I'm kind of a sick mind. I kind of want to see what it would be like if they had a disastrous year, but it wouldn't be good.
You are sick. That's a sick-minded thing to say. But yeah, no, you're right. I mean, their fans came in hot and heavy, man, and they were ready to just unload on Big 12 fans, and it was certainly an interesting season for them there in Salt Lake City. But I don't know. At this point, between those 2 teams that you mentioned, I would feel a lot better about TCU next year than I do with Utah. I will say that.
Honestly, this might be a better question for the future, but it might be better to ask which teams don't have pressure on them, because you can throw the new coaches out of there, so you can exempt UCF, West Virginia. But other than that, I mean, Texas Tech, we haven't even talked about them. They spent all that money in the portal and have the top portal class in the country. They will be expected to compete at the top. Iowa State is probably exempt from most pressure, but they're still going to be expected to be near that Big 12 championship game. I don't think fans realistically expect them to get back again, just replacing Higgins and Knoll. But again, that a lot of teams, Baylor, Dave Aranda almost got fired in October last year. So there's a lot of teams that have stuff to prove in 2025.
Yeah, I could go all day with this. You're right. Tech's essentially cashing in to win now. That is what they are doing. They're putting all their chips on the middle of the table, and they're trying to win now. So that was another one. If I would have went a different direction with that, with my answer there, that would have probably been my number 1 team, just because of how much money they put into the portal.
Maybe the answer to the previous question of who is the least pressure exempt from a brand new coach, it's probably Houston. They're playing with house money going into this year. They were a fun story at the end, but man, I'm kind of ready to run through a brick wall talking football already. Well, So we kind of mentioned it. Sam Levitt certainly has a case. Who would you say is the best quarterback in the Big 12?
I could go with Rocco, Barrett Morton, who quietly had a great season. Sawyer Robinson for Baylor emerged. Avery Johnson still as talented as all get out. And Josh Hoover for TCU, who, and I'll mention Josh Hoover here for just a second. I think he could be a sneaky good play for Big 12
very underrated.
Player of the Year. Yes, very underrated. The arm talent to me is insane with him. But damn it, and you're not going to like this, give me Sam Levitt from Arizona State. Like, what he did as a freshman was incredible. 24 touchdown passes, 6 interceptions, threw for nearly 3,000 yards. And he's a guy that I think has a lot of upside. As I said before, he just kept getting better as the season went on. From week 2 or 3, he was a completely different player by the time the Big 12 title game rolled around. And I'm curious to see if that trend continues with him with the full offseason under his belt as the starter. He's got ability to run the football. His poise in the pocket for a guy his age is pretty damn impressive. And, maybe it is a cop-out answer, but I really do like Sam Levitt. But I will say, too, those other guys that I just mentioned, I think you can make a case for any one of them as well.
Yeah, I'll agree with you. I do think it's Levitt. He's got to cut some of the moments out, like once a game, where he almost does something like so irresponsibly stupid that it could cost his team the game. But again, he was a freshman. Those mistakes will get ironed out, I think. And what he showed in the Big 12 championship, in the college football playoff, when it's a 3rd and 9 and no one's open, the ability to make a play with his legs. Incredible. It's stuff like that to where I think I probably called Levitt a gamer 3 times a week on the show this fall. I think it's those qualities that make him the best quarterback in the Big 12 in a similar way to Rocco Becht, whereas the other guys I trust a lot more to be efficient air raid offense type quarterbacks. But again, there's a lot of good quarterbacks in this league, so I'll give it to Levitt. But again, sophomore slumps are a real thing, and they've got a tough schedule coming up in 2025. That's been a bit of football talk for mid-February. We'll try and sprinkle that in throughout the month and throughout the spring. Let's do it. Random Big 12 basketball player. Who did I get it last week?
Yeah, I think it's 2-2.
You got Cade Cunningham, yeah.
Yeah, that's right. 2-2. All right.
Jake acting like, I don't know if I get it, just so we can mention that he did indeed get it last week.
I think this one's a pretty good one here. So buckle up. You guys ready?
Let's do it.
I was born ready.
This guard played for 3 different schools in college and spent his final season at a Big 12 school. In that final season, he finished in the top 20 in the Big 12 in scoring, but 3rd on his team, averaging 11.3 points per game. Shot over 38% from behind the arc his senior season, and he helped his team make a deep run in the NCAA tournament.
Did he only play for one Big 12 school?
Yes.
Okay. I was going to say Jalen Coleman Lands, but...
He only played for one Big 12 school.
It's a deep tournament run.
And by deep, I mean really deep.
I'm thinking Baylor.
This player has not played in the conference in the last 5 years.
Okay. Ooh.
I'll give you a window.
I'm thinking it's that Tech team that went to the national championship.
You're onto something.
It's not McCuller because he played for 2 Big 12 teams.
It's not Mac McClung. Or maybe it is. Is it Mac McClung?
Nope.
Oh, man.
Who are the guards on that team?
I know. I'm thinking of the big. Yeah, Jarrett Culver. I'm thinking McCuller. That's tough.
You're on the right track. Both you guys are kind of like in that range. I guess I can give you the last hint. He helped his team reach a national championship game.
Yeah,
I'm blanking on a name.
It's Tech.
I think we have it down, but we don't know the player.
Are you tapping out?
Yeah.
Jake, are you tapping out?
I guess.
It's wrestling season, so you're tapping out, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Answer is Matt Mooney from Texas Tech. Matt Mooney.
Don't think I would have gotten that.
Very forgettable. I think a lot of people forget about him. Yes. Yeah. Third in this team is scoring. Had some great moments there at Tech, but
man, that was an incredible team.
Lost to
Virginia.
Lost to Virginia in overtime.
Yeah, they lost to Kyle Guy. I'm trying to remember who else was on that.
I don't remember
on that Virginia team.
Yeah, I don't remember anything about that Virginia team. I just remember they were really good.
Yeah, that was it. That was a great Texas Tech team.
Yes,
Chris Beard, where did it go wrong? In more ways than one.
I don't think we have enough time on the show to talk about that. Let's not go there. Let's not.
All right. We'll close the show today with some Big 12 basketball picks. I'm sorry. Another week. Another win for me. Moved to 4-0. Or wait, no. It would be 3-0-1 against Derek. Sorry, man. You got me in football.
Yeah.
I've got a stronghold on basketball right now. 1-2 week for Derek, 4-8 overall. I went 2-1, move up to 8-4 overall. We'll start with Big Monday. Baylor at Houston. The Cougs per Ken Palm would be favored by about 11.5 right now.
You know, I said I wasn't going to hit the panic button on this Houston team just yet, and I'm not. They're going to win this game. I don't know. It's just going to depend on what Baylor team shows up. I think Baylor comes ready to play. I think Baylor's going to cover that spread. However, I think Houston's going to win the game.
I've been going back and forth on this.
It's a tough one.
And I don't want to overreact to what we've seen from Houston the last week. But at the same time, with what I've seen from Baylor against some of these elite teams, they have been a step or two below. And I think Houston is going to be motivated. It's a short turnaround to Monday. It's a tough place to play. I think Houston covers that spread, and they win another one of these games in that 12-15 range. So we'll go head to head on that one. Tuesday night, 6:00 on ESPN Plus. Iowa State plays at UCF. The Cyclones looks like will be favored by about 6.5 points.
Another ESPN Plus game, Joy. I don't feel UCF doesn't stand a chance this one. I'm sorry. I'm going to take the Clones to cover here. I would probably take them by almost 10 points.
Really? Okay. I'm going the other way.
I feel good about where Iowa State is now.
I'm going the other way. I'm taking UCF. I think Iowa State wins the game, but UCF was embarrassed in Ames just 3 weeks ago. That's a tough-ish place to play. I'm glad it's not on a Saturday, it seems like that place can be a hornet's nest on those early Saturday games. But again, it feels similar to the Arizona State game for me for Iowa State, where it might be a struggle early, but they pull away at the end. But I'll still just take UCF for the insurance.
Hey, Iowa State won that Arizona State game by...
They did. They ended up covering by a lot. So
exactly.
That could certainly happen. And then this one. Oh, man. I cannot wait for this game. Tuesday night at 7:00, Arizona at Kansas State. As of right now, Ken Palm looks like it'd have it at about a 3.5 point spread towards Arizona. I don't know what Vegas will have it at.
I'm rolling with the hot hand Wildcats here at Kansas State, that is. But I don't know. It's going to be a tough environment. If this game were played in Tucson, I'd probably feel different. But with this game being played in Manhattan, I'm taking Kansas State to win this game outright.
Yeah, I don't know how you can give K-State points at home at this point and not pick them. I got to go with K-State. You give me 3.5. There's a shot that they lose and you still hit. I would feel pretty safe in that. But this is a turning point. Like, this is This is one of those games that is a turning point in the story of the season. If K-State plays spoiler, it helps their tournament case and continues to be one of the best stories in the conference. And if Arizona goes on the road, who knows? Who knows what's possible as they'll face off with Houston on Saturday.
A lot of storylines coming out of this game. They can go so many different directions.
Yeah, I can't wait.
The outcome. Yep.
Hopefully I'm locked in. Tuesday nights are a bit tough for me, so it might have to be a rewatch late Tuesday night type game for me. But I think that's going to do it. Any Super Bowl pick with your mind, not your heart? I
would pick both teams to lose. I don't know. I don't even have a pick. I just don't want Kansas City to win.
Who do you think is going to win?
Kansas City. It's depressing.
How about them Chiefs, baby? How about them?
It's just depressing to think about.
The Lombardi Trophy will have a red and gold tint once again.
Oh.
The doubter. It's going to be a bad day for the doubters. Which of them there are many. Really, I mean, the entire world has doubted the Chiefs, and here they are doing the impossible. Little old Patrick Mahomes and little old Andy Reid doing it again.
I wonder what the Vegas lines are for like Taylor Swift cuts. Like how many times is she going to be on the screen? There's got to be like an over-under for that.
How many was it last year? I want to say it ended up being less than we thought. I mean, Aiden's probably got this memorized, but...
Damn it, I wanted Brock Purdy to win so bad.
Was it a lot or was it not a lot last year?
It was way less than people thought it was going to be.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
The big debate I remember was, are we going to see more of Taylor or more of the Burger King Whopper commercial?
Oh, that's right.
Whopper. Yeah, that one.
You're going to get us flagged on YouTube. All right, well, we'll get out of here. Thanks for supporting Iowa Everywhere. Thanks for listening to Bigger Than 12. We got a good week in store. Two guys, Murph and Andy, overthinking on Monday. Randy Peterson will have a new column. And we'll be back here on Bigger Than 12 next week.